you that had the October 7th attack been an attack by Hamas troops on Israeli troops or on Israeli military installations or on Israeli prisons in order to free their people from there, while some people, of course, many people in Israel would nonetheless treat this as an attack on their country, quite understandably, I think both the world and Israel and I would have reacted very differently. Right. So the issue is that you say, of course, targeting civilians is wrong, and that's something we, of course, agree on. And the problem is that October 7th was not in any way an attempt to redress the wrongs committed by the IDF. It doesn't compensate for them. It doesn't fix them. It doesn't solve them. It's simply an act of terror designed to brutalize and murder and enslave the civilian population of those areas. So if you are asking me about that, you have to start by acknowledging that that is a terrorist attack. Now, how would any country, this is what I'm asking you, respond to a terrorist attack? In exactly the way that Israel has done. So you can tell me about the plight of the Palestinian people, and I can agree with you. I can say to you, look, for the sake of argument, the Palestinians are under occupation, and Israel and the IDF are terrible, and they go in there and mow the lawn, and all of these other things that I've heard from many, many people, and I can agree with you on all of that. That does not justify a terrorist attack on Israeli civilians, and it never will. And that's the difficulty that we're having, because people who are arguing from your position, including you in this conversation, are trying to present October 7th as some attempt to offset the evils done by the IDF as you perceive them. And I'm saying to you, there is no connection between the two. No amount of Israeli brutality justifies the massacre of civilians. If Jews during World War II had risen up in the Warsaw Ghetto and just went around raping German women and slaughtering German civilians, that would have been wrong too. When the Soviets, the people who were my ancestors, raped their way through Eastern Germany on the way to Berlin, that was wrong. I am one of the people who's actually been quite prominent in raising Soviet war atrocities, even though I think that war needed to be won, right? So, and that isn't, by the way, the same as the aerial bombardment of Germany or dropping the bombs on Japan, which was absolutely right and necessary for military reasons, right? So there's difference between targeting civilians gratuitously for violence, and military necessity, and this is where I think we're getting stuck.
Yeah, we're getting stuck because you're unable to see the very transparent the hypocrisy in your position.
Explain it to me. I'll try to understand. Explain it to me.
That tweet said, I give exactly 0 Fs about how they return. Now, that was in the context of the fact when they freed, I think, 3 or 4 hostages. This was June 9th. They freed 4 hostages. And in order to free those 4 hostages, about 300 Palestinian civilians were killed. 200 to 300 Palestinian civilians were killed. Aerial bombardment and special unit military forces came in, and they knew that they were going to have to massacre a lot of civilians in order to get out, and they did it. How is that in any way different from what Hamas did on October 7th? Just because you refuse to accept...
May I answer that question?
Yeah, let me finish. Hang on. Okay. Just because you refuse to accept the distinction that, no, Hamas can't possibly be justified, I'm trying to tell you, this is just the atrocity propaganda kicking in, because in your mind, it's it's rape, it's murder, it's unjustifiable. Nothing that Israel does could possibly justify this. Well, no. Hamas also wanted to free thousands of Palestinian prisoners. Israel wanted to free hundreds of Israeli prisoners. And Israel killed hundreds of civilians. Hamas killed hundreds of civilians. Probably most of them were killed by Israel. But even accepting the idea that they killed civilians, why is it that in your mind this murder of civilians is justified because you're freeing hostages, but that murder of civilians is not justified?
For the reason that I've already explained to you repeatedly, which is if you take my wife hostage and I come to your house and you try to prevent me from rescuing her, I'm going to shoot you in the head and I'm going to feel great about it. If you come to my house and kill my family because of something I've done, that's a completely different thing. Do you understand the difference?
No, it's exactly the same thing.
So you feel there's no difference between Konstantin said something rude to me or did something bad to me. I'm going to come to his house and I'm going to murder his family.
No. You are missing the point that it's the same thing. They've taken hostages.
It's not the same thing.
It's not, they both taken hostages.
It's absolutely not the same thing.
Why are the
punishing people who are not involved
worthy of being rescued?
Hold on. The civilians who were murdered by Hamas on October 7th had nothing to do with the atrocities that you say are being committed against Palestinians, right?
And the civilians murdered by Israel had nothing to do with the atrocities committed by Hamas.
Except they were killed in an attempt to rescue hostages, right?
How is that different? It's the same thing that Hamas says.
Because
I'm not trying to
Hamas
defend
killed
Hamas, to be clear
civilians
here.
in order to kill civilians. The Israeli troops killed civilians in order to rescue hostages. That's
No.
the difference.
No, the difference is Hamas took civilians hostages, and most likely the Israelis killed their own civilians. But even accepting the fact that Hamas killed civilians,
Okay,
Israel
so let's
killed
clarify that one
at least
point.
50,000 civilians over the last 9 months.
Let's
They
clarify
killed
that one point. How many
50,000
civilians do you think Hamas killed on October 7th? Because you keep saying you're against targeting of civilians, but it also sounds like you don't think they killed any civilians.
I haven't seen convincing evidence that they have. I think the majority of the civilian deaths were from friendly fire.
So how many would you say that they did kill Hamas?
So Kisin and Safety are going at it, and they're each basically, going from their position. So let me try to see if I can simplify this. Konstantin is saying that Israel was going after the hostages. And in the process of going after the hostages, it's a war. And there's going to be casualties. There's going to be civilian casualties. There's also going to be, military casualties. You're going to have collateral damage. Now, the whole idea has been the world is talking about the proportionality of the response. So if 12, 13, 1,400 people on one side are killed, do you just sort of say justifiably, I don't know, would 5,000 or 10,000 deaths on the Palestinian side, would that have not caused this type of a discussion, proportionality? 1,500 to 10,000? But now you're talking about 1,500, 1,200, whatever that amount is. Let's say 1,000 to 1,500, but then you're talking about tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands on the other side. Well, Safety is saying, but what difference does that matter? We were trying, the Hamas, what he won't call them terrorists, but insurgents or freedom fighters, whatever Safety's word is going to be on characterizing the people from the Hamas side, that they were also going in to liberate thousands of prisoners being held by Israel. Well, he's not getting the point that Kisin is trying to make. But then why did you go after and kill civilians? If you were going after, let's say, a military complex, or let's say they were being housed in civilian areas, in order for you to get those people, civilians had to die because they were defending, they were defending that position. And you had to bomb that area, you had to get into that area to get your prisoners out. And in the course of trying to get your prisoners out, the prisoners out, civilians were killed. We can discuss whether or not that's right or wrong, but you can basically have an argument to say they have our people, they've incarcerated them, they've imprisoned them, we're trying to free them. In the act of freeing them, collateral damage. But that's not what happened. That's not what happened. They literally targeted that area that was happening in that municipality, that city, that township, and killed thousands of people. I don't know how many prisoners they liberated from Israeli jails of Palestinian, prisoners. I don't know. Nobody's telling us. But then Safety basically doesn't even think that they were killing people, that it was the own IDF forces that were killing the Jewish people, because they didn't want the Jewish people to fall into the hands and become captives of Hamas. So there's some type, I forget the name he used, an act that's supposedly within, I guess it's something that the IDF forces, the army forces have been told. We don't want Jewish people to become captives. It's better if you kill them, if you can do so, rather than have them being held captive so that they don't use them as leverage against us. I mean, I just think that's just absolutely retarded if that is true. I mean, if you can shoot your own, well, why can't you shoot the person who's dragging that person away? I mean, if it's one-on-one, right? That just doesn't make sense to me. But be that as it may, that's where these two are going to lock horns. He's not going to convince Safety in one bit, and Safety's not going to come up with anything that basically, allows him to have any steady footing on any type of solid ground in regards to this. That's basically the point. Anyways, let's get back to the interview here, the discussion, the battle royale. You're watching the Dr. Nasir Shaikh Show. I'm your host, Dr. Nasir. If you haven't done so already, subscribe to the channel. Y'all know what to do. Let's get on with this discussion right now.
Into this, but it's very telling that Israel won't have an investigation into this.
But how many would you say that they've killed? I mean, it's a simple question.
I don't know. I don't know. I haven't done an investigation, but I'd like to see one. And I think it's very telling that they won't do one.
No. But that's not answering my question, right? That girl whose dead body we saw being driven off in the back of a truck, was she killed by Israeli forces?
No.
So that's one. That's one that we can say was definitely killed by Hamas, okay?
Yeah.
Right. How many more do you think were probably killed by Hamas?
I'm telling you, I don't know. I could make up a number.
Is it 10? Is it 100? Is it 1,000? How many?
I don't know. I'd like to see an investigation into this. But you know what I do know?
But you're absolutely certain about Hamas figures about how many Palestinians have been killed, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not certain about their figures. I know what is going on in Gaza, and I know that there is no way that you could destroy an entire city of 2 million people and not kill at least tens of thousands of people.
Okay.
There's been tens of thousands of deaths. And I know because I know people in Gaza. I know people who know people in Gaza, and I know just how many of the people they know have been dead. I think what's been reported.
I'm not disputing that lots of people have been killed in Gaza.
Yeah, and I think
what I am disputing that Hamas didn't kill civilians. Hamas killed a lot of civilians on October 7th.
Yes, but Israel has killed a lot more civilians, and this is what you.
No, but the comparative game there is irrelevant to me. We killed a lot more German civilians than Germany killed our civilians in World War II. I think that's perfectly justified.
This is what I mean when I say Zionist NPC. We can kill as many of them as we can, as we want, because that's justified, because we are reacting, because we are just, because we are trying to get our hostages back. Nothing they do is justified. It's not. It only works in your brain. Because you have
Safety. Are you even listening to what I'm saying? You keep saying the phrase, nothing they do is justified. I just said to you 3 times now, 3 times, if Hamas had attacked Israeli military installations and IDF troops and killed IDF troops and Israeli military installations were destroyed, that to me would be a completely different thing. So it's not that nothing they do is justified.
But any crime by Hamas justifies any kind of reaction by Israel.
No.
Which is why you never see any kind of criticism coming from people like you towards anything that Israel does.
You have to actually listen to what I'm saying. Otherwise, it's impossible to have a conversation.
I am listening. I'm just pointing out the hypocrisy of saying that it's okay for Israel to kill 50,000 people to rescue their hostages. It's not okay for Hamas to kill anybody. I'm trying to tell you it's wrong for both. I'm trying to tell you it's wrong for both.
No, but you see, you keep missing deliberately, I think, at this point, because you're a smart guy. You keep missing the point that I'm making, which is that there's a big difference between attempting to rescue hostages or attempting to kill terrorists and simply targeting civilians for the purpose of targeting civilians, right? There's a big difference between those two principles. One of those things is called war. The other of those things is called terrorism. And there's a big difference between the two. Strapping a bomb to your chest and getting on a bus is very different to going to war and attempting to rescue hostages, in the process of which civilians get killed. They're different activities entirely. There's a different moral calculus, and it works entirely differently. That's the difference.
I see. So you're not a fan of terrorism, and you think terrorism is not justifiable. You don't think targeting civilians is justifiable.
Correct.
And does that include Palestinian civilians?
It includes any civilians anywhere. Including,
And so-
by the way, for example, right, I'm Russian, my wife is Ukrainian, I have lots of family in both countries. I have been very outspokenly pro-Ukrainian throughout the entire conflict. I do not support killing Russian civilians in retaliation to what Russia is doing in Ukraine, nor do I support, obviously, Russia killing Ukrainian civilians, right? So it's not difficult to support people being able to wage war in situations where they have to wage war, without also then condemning the massacring of civilians that is deliberate and purposeful targeting for the sake of killing civilians. That is not the same as collateral damage and conflict. They're different things.
No, but here's the thing. The problem is that you think any kind of death meted out by Israel is collateral damage because in your mind, anything
No,
Israel
I don't. I don't think that.
Yes, which is why you don't see when Israel goes and murders Palestinians, when an Israeli terrorist goes into a Palestinian village and shoots people, as happens every day these days in the West Bank, every single day, pogroms of settlers surrounded by soldiers protecting them, going into Palestinian villages, burning people's homes, burning their cars, shooting people. This happens every day. You don't say anything about it. You don't condemn it. You don't think it's a problem. You don't
If you want me to condemn it, I will happily look. I don't
want you to condemn it. I don't want you to
let me respond. Safety.
No,
You've got to let me respond.
Go ahead.
You made the point. You got to let me respond. So, as I said to you, I don't talk about this issue publicly because it's not an area of expertise of mine. If anyone asks me about the West Bank, I can tell you what my understanding of the West Bank is. I don't like a lot of the things that are being done in the West Bank. I don't like a lot of the things that the settlers are doing. And I do not support burning people's homes and massacring people and killing people and pushing them out of wherever they live. So when you say you don't condemn it, if you ask my opinion, I will give it to you. I don't support some of the things that are being done there.
Yes, this is a great answer for me because it's exactly my problem with this entire idiotic fetish that pro-Israel people have about condemn, which I find idiotic because it's meaningless. Because I'm not asking you to condemn things, and I'm not asking, and I hate it when people ask me to condemn things because I don't condemn anybody. I don't condemn Israel. I don't condemn any authority because who am I? I'm in no position. I'm not their mom to condemn them. I'm not their benefactor. And so it's meaningless to say what is who's condemning things. What I'm talking about.
You just said to me, you don't condemn it, and that's what I responded to.
Yes, because
but
what
I do
I'm trying
condemn it if I'm asked to.
Yes, exactly. But what I'm trying to illustrate is that if you look at your tweets, if you look at your position on this, and whenever it's brought up, you bring up the death of Israeli civilians, and then use it as justification for anything Israel does. So you look at all of your discussions.
I don't use it as justification for anything
about how they return. So Israel can do whatever it wants. And then you don't care about all the targeting of Palestinian civilians that takes place. And you never bring up the fact that anything that the Palestinians do in return is justifiable. Notice I'm not saying that it is. Let me be clear here. I'm perfectly consistent. Let me be clear. I'm perfectly consistent. I think everybody's wrong to target civilians. And I think targeting civilians does not justify any kind of reaction. So I'm not okay to go and target Israeli civilians because they targeted Palestinian civilians. You are the one who's swallowed the Zionist NPC propaganda hook, line, and sinker, and don't even see the distinction here, wherein no matter what Israel does, it doesn't matter. You're not going out there posting videos of the horrific things that are taking place in the West Bank, of the horrific things that Israel's been doing to Palestinians for 8 years, of the land theft, of the mass murder, of the terrorist attacks, the enormous number of terrorist attacks. I mean, Menachem Begin, the Israeli prime minister, boasted about the fact that he invented modern terrorism because the first civilian bomb, the first bomb to target civilians, the first people to think about the idea of let's put bombs in civilians was by the Zionists in Palestine against Palestinian civilians. So you, in your mind, you don't see anything wrong with that ever. And that's why for me, it's not about asking you to condemn it. It's about looking at where your energy goes. And
Man, that was just brutal listening to. I mean, if I had to go back over that again, I think my neck would snap and my head would fall off. The circular argument that Safety is making, I mean, he's saying you don't condemn everything. And I don't want you to condemn everything. Who am I? I'm not their mother. I don't condemn Israel. I don't condemn everything. Oh, hey, Konstantin, do you condemn the killing of civilians? Do you condemn everything that the Israeli and the IDF and the settlers are doing in the West Bank? Do you condemn that? Safe and Kisin, yeah, I condemn it. Well, I don't want your condemnation. Who asked you for your condemnation? Nobody's asking. That's just condemnation means nothing. Well, then what the fuck are you asking him for? I mean, I don't even know what type of a debating tactic this is. This is like you're on one side and then, you go to the opposite, the extreme side. It's just absolutely stupid. It makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. Safety would have made a better point if he had kept his mouth shut. Just, I don't even know what these people sometimes, just for the sake of, just for the sake of just stupidity, for being argumentative, trying to play both sides, talking out both sides of your mouth, it's really, really a bad look. Now, if you happen to be on safety's side, if you happen to be basically, you are, anti-Zionist, you're anti-Semitic, you're just anti-Israel, you're everything, then of course you're going to be, hooray, clapping for safety. And of course you are. But if you're any sane, logical person who doesn't have a dog in the fight, you're probably, when you re-loop that video and watch it over again, you're probably going to come to the same conclusion I did, is that I don't have any idea what point is he trying to make? Beats me. If you can sort of get that down and put it in the comments below and let me think what you think he means, we'd all love it. Anyways, folks, we appreciate you taking the time to watch. You've been watching the Dr. Nasir Shaikh Show. I've been your host. My name is Dr. Nasir. If you haven't done so already, subscribe to the channel, like, share, and follow. You all know what to do. Take a look at our other video links below. Check more of our other video cuts of this debate, interrogation, whatever you want to call it, between Safety and Konstantin. My final thought is always, when you're right, you're right. And when you're left, just plain wrong. Until next time, folks, take care and stay safe.